All right, so I got that taken care of. I'll cross it off my list. Notice how number 1 starts. What's the first sentence? Do what? The Lord spoke to Moses. That apparently was the original name of the book of Numbers, is Wedebar. He spoke. And that's really a big point in Numbers, is how the Lord speaks and lays down not just his commands, but also his blessings, his requirements for his people. One of the things that's going to happen as we proceed through this is we're going to see how holy God is. God will say over and over again, do not allow a common person to come up to the tabernacle, approach it like they're going to touch things and look at things. And only the priests, only my people. And it's a dangerous thing to be a priest. We'll get to that in a minute. But when God is holy, when he gives his commands, he is protecting his people. He's telling them, this is what you can do that's going to help you. This is what you're going to do that's going to kill you. Don't do those things. So there is the Lord speaking to Moses. The Lord spoke to Moses in the tent of meeting in the desert of Sinai on the first day of the second month of the second year after the Israelites came out of Egypt. Things are moving pretty quickly, right? I mean, we've moved all the way through the book of Exodus. We've moved all the way through the book of Leviticus into the book of Numbers, and it's only been a couple of years. All we got to do now is march about a week, and we're going to be at the promised land. We're going to be ready to invade it. We're going to go in, take possession of everything that God has given us. How many years later do they get to the promised land? 40. There's all kinds of terrible things happening in between here. He commands a census. He said, verse 2, take a census of the whole Israelite community by their clans and families, listing every man by name, one by one. You and Aaron are to count according to their divisions, all the men in Israel who are 20 years old or more and able to serve in the army. One man from each tribe, each of them the head of his family, is to help you. And he gives a list of the names, and then he takes those men and uses them to do a census of the people of Israel. Now, obviously for us, I mean, how many of you have, even knowing that we're going to be studying Numbers chapter 1, how many of you read the census past the first verse or two, where it says, from the descendants of Reuben, the firstborn of Israel, all the men 20 years old or more who were able to serve in the army were listed by name. We got that. Let's go down to the number, go to the next one, go to the next one, go to the next one. We don't have to read all that stuff, right? To us, that is just a repetitious counting of heads. I mean, who in the world wants to make a big, long chapter out of taking a census? For Israel, though, it's a whole different thing. For one thing, they think differently than we do, and they look at those census lists in a little bit different way. We just kind of look at them as boring and repetitive. They would look at them as being a little bit more exciting. It's just the Hebrew way. It is the Semitic way. All the Semites of that particular part of the world, when they have a list, they will do this. They will, it's repetitious, so-and-so, 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 number, so-and-so, 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 number. So it's not unusual that this happened. But for Israel, this is a really deeply encouraging theological statement. This is about God's blessing. This is about God's choosing. This is about God's leading. This is about God's protecting them. After all, when they get through counting the children of Israel, what kind of numbers do they come up with? 15, 20, 30 people in a family. 15, 20, 30 people in a clan. And put all those clans together and you've got 150, 200 people, a little group of people wandering through That's not the idea you get out of this chapter at all. What kind of numbers are you talking about? Man, tens of thousands. The tribe of Reuben, 46,500. The tribe of Simeon, 59,300. When you get down to the bottom of all of this, what's the total? 603,550. How big is Amarillo? Anybody remember what the last census number was? It's about 200,000, right at 200,000. Now think about what's 3 times that big. That's what and that's just the men that are of military age that they're counting there. So there is something in the Israelites' mind about this blessing of God. How many people were there when they went down into Egypt? How many? $70. 70. Oh, 70. Sorry, I can't. There we go. I was blinking it wrong. There were 70. And they come out 400 years later and there's 3,000 soldiers. Man, that is really a blessing. That's really what they're getting to there. Look at who's counted. Who is counted? Military men, which is kind of a look toward conquering the promised land. You know, we're getting ready to conquer the promised land. God's going to organize his army. He's going to organize his people. It's not as though God is going to walk in there and say, okay, everybody dead. Everybody out. My people are coming in. The people are going to have to go in there and take that land. God is sending them in there. God is working through human beings. That's an important idea, I think. God is working through people to get his work done. And so he's sending these people in there. Which tribes are counted? Do what? Well, everybody but the Levites. And are the Levites counted eventually? Yeah, the Levites will even be counted. The point is, every tribe is included. They all belong. They all have a place. Now, I'm going to talk about that in a minute, about a little bit more individualistically. But every tribe is included in that particular counting. There is nobody left out, nobody left behind. There's not one good tribe and one bad tribe. There's not one preeminent tribe and a bunch of little bitty tribes that would be, we'd rather not have those guys. Every single member of Israel is important. Every single tribe is included. You're going to have the tribal listings over and over again. 1 verses 20 through 43 in what we're looking at now. 2 verses 3 through 31, they're listed again. 7, 12 through 83. 10, 14 through 28, 13, 4 through 15, 26, 5 through 1. Do you think it's important for the tribes to be listed? I mean, over and over again, he just keeps repeating them. You know, let me tell you who the tribes are. Don't forget who the tribes are. Don't forget, these people are important in God's plan. These are God's people, all of them, and none are left out. Secondly, their names are recorded. Notice, let's see, what do I want to say? Yeah, look down at verse 18. They called the whole community together on the first day of the second month. The people registered their ancestry by their clans and families, and the men 20 years old or more were listed by name, one by one. Now, take a look at John chapter 10, verse 5. Over in the New Testament. Jesus is talking about the fact that he is the good shepherd. He talks about the gatekeeper opening the gate for the shepherd. The sheep listen to his voice. He calls his sheep. Look at verse 3, I guess, is really where I want to start. The gatekeeper opens the gate for him, and the sheep listen to his voice. He calls his own sheep by name and leads them out. When he's brought out all his own, he goes on ahead of them, and his sheep follow him because they know his voice. But they will never follow a stranger. In fact, they'll run away from him because they do not recognize a stranger's voice. How does Jesus know his sheep? By name. By name. And that's important because he doesn't just stand up here and go, "Come, sheep." And this big flock of sheep goes ambling up to him, you know, and here we go across. How do you know which one's missing? Well, he knows, because he knows that's Sally and that's Fred and that's John and that's Karen and that's, you know, he knows all of those sheep by name. He knows us by name. He knows who we are, and he sees us. That Psalm 33 a while ago, you know, he has a vision. He sees all of mankind. He sees every human being. And that's not just a statement about God's omnipresence or omnivisualization of the world. It is a statement about God's concern for every single person. You belong to him as Jesus' people, and he knows you by name. Go over to Revelation chapter 14. Well, no, Revelation 7, I guess, is really where I want to go. You're getting ready in the book of Revelation for God to start wiping things out on earth. I mean, he's going to punish these horrible people that blaspheme his name and persecute his people. And the last thing you have in chapter 6 is the opening of the sixth seal. And you open that sixth seal and everything horrible happens. Verse 12 of chapter 6, I watched as he opened the sixth seal. There was a great earthquake. The sun turned black like sackcloth made of goat hair. The whole moon turned blood red. The stars in the sky fell to the earth as figs drop from a fig tree when shaken by a strong wind. The heavens receded like a scroll being rolled up. Every mountain and island was removed from its place. Then the kings of the earth, the princes, the generals, the rich, the mighty, and everyone else, both slave and free, hid in the caves and among the rocks and the mountains. They called to the mountains and the rocks, fall on us and hide us from the face of him who sits on the throne and from the wrath of the Lamb. For the great day of their wrath has come, and who can withstand it? What's the very next vision John has? After this, I saw 4 angels standing at the 4 corners of the earth, holding back the 4 winds of the earth to keep them from blowing on the land or the sea or any tree. Then I saw another angel coming up from the east, having the seal of the living God. What are seals for? They're what? Sorry. Official business, but it's basically to say, this belongs to me. That's what the official business is. The king stamped this. It's his letter or his deed or whatever it is. It's ownership. I saw another angel coming from the east having the seal of the living God. He called out in a loud voice to the 4 angels who'd been given power to harm the land and the sea. Do not harm the land or the sea or the trees until we put a seal on the foreheads of the servants of our God. Then I heard the number of those who were sealed, 144,000 from all the tribes of Israel. From the tribe of Judah, 12,000. From the tribe of Reuben, 12,000. Gad, 12,000. Asher, I'm not going to go through all of that, but there's 12,000 from each one of the tribes. What does that tell you? What's the point of that vision? 144,000 that are sealed, 12,000 from each tribe. Having just read Numbers, and here's that census with all of those tribes listed, what does that tell you in Revelation 7? Here are all of God's people, and he hadn't forgotten anyone. I mean, here are the kings of the earth and all, everybody's slave and free. They're screaming for the caves to collapse on them and the rocks of the mountains to fall on them and hide them from God. Get us away. How many Christians got caught in that landslide? Not a single one. They are all there. 144,000 is 12 times 12 times 12 times 1,000. 12 times 12 times 12 times 10 times 10, which in the numerology of Revelation is this is all there is and there ain't no more. God did not forget a single one. So when we're hearing all of these horrible things that are happening in the book of Revelation, and all of these punishments that God is dealing out, and all of the evil people cast into the lake of fire, and the beast cast into the lake of fire, Satan cast into the lake of fire. How many Christians get accidentally wrapped up in all of that judgment and accidentally get thrown into the lake of fire? Not a single one. As a matter of fact, when you get through with this particular thing where all of these 144,000 are sealed, all of God's people are marked so that they will not be punished in these great judgments of God. After this, I looked, verse 9, and there before me was a great multitude that no one could count, from every nation, people, tribe, and language, standing before the throne and before the Lamb. Who are these people? Everybody. Well, they're the ones that have come through the tribulation. He will say, verse 13, one of the elders asked me, these in white robes, who are they and where did they come from? And I answered, sir, you know. And he said, These are they who have come out of the Great Tribulation. These are the same 144,000 you saw in the first vision, where they stopped and said, wait, let me mark everybody because everybody is important. When we get to the other end of it and you look back, what have you got? All of those folks who've come through that Great Tribulation. How many of them got lost? Not a single one. God didn't overlook a single one. There's not a single one missing. That's an important theological statement in the book of Numbers, where you have the census and all of those people listed because their names are recorded. There is nothing impersonal about this. Let's just gather up this big old huge group of people and go mow all the Canaanites down in the promised land. Not at all. This is God concerned about every individual, every soldier, every person that's part of the Israelite nation. Third, the enrollment is done by tribes, clans, and families. There is a community nature to Israel. I did a lot of reading yesterday on these communities and about clans and tribes and families, and it wasn't going to add anything to our understanding of Numbers, so we're not going to go through all of that, except to say that there is a sense of belonging. There is a sense of community. And, I am a part of this group. I am a vital part of this group. Now, does it ever strike you funny that there are 600,000 soldiers in the Israelite group? There are some real problems with the size of the numbers that are listed in the book of. Let me tell you a few. Some that have occurred to you, and some of them that have probably not occurred to you. First of all, there are the problems of the logistical nightmares of getting. If you've got 603,000 guys from the age of 20 and up, how many people do you probably have as a whole when you start counting women and children and everybody else? Anywhere between 2 and 2.5 million, probably. And that's huge, right? Think about the logistical problems of getting 2.5 million people to even take a step and not just run over each other. You ever been on Times Square in New York City? And that's not even necessarily tens of thousands of people, but that's the most crowded place I believe I've ever been in my lifetime. Amarillo, as we said, is only about 200,000. Think about trying to herd that group through the desert. Okay, we're going to take Amarillo, and in 2 days, we're going to move from here to Oklahoma City. You think you can do it? It'd be really tough. That's a problem. Think about the problems of communication with this group. I mean, I can go down on the courthouse in Amarillo and stand up on the roof and yell, "Hey, everybody!" How many people are going to turn and look? And that was pretty loud, right? How many people turn and look? A few. How do you talk to the nation the way Moses has talked to the nation? Of course, miracles. Okay, we can have miracles, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But the idea is there are just these big logistical problems. How do you feed that many people in a desert? Well, and it's fairly clear that in the book of Exodus and the book of Numbers, that miracles only happen occasionally. It's not as though God is doing, bringing them quail every day, but he brings it occasionally, when they are getting bad. Feeding the people is a problem. Sanitation issues. I mean, you've got a holy camp, and we're going to look at this in a minute, and the Israelite camp is to be a holy place, and God will tell them, don't just use the bathroom any place you want to. You go outside the camp, and you dig a slick trench, and you do your business, and then you cover it over. Do not allow the camp to become contaminated. There are those sanitation issues. One of my good friends is Floyd Harmon over in Amarillo. He is the head of the sanitation department in Amarillo. Floyd is now bald. He just pulled his hair out trying to figure out how do you handle all the sewer problems in Amarillo. And well, it's a big issue, all right? Think about this. How many firstborn males are there when they count the firstborn males? They count 22,273 firstborn males. Divide that into 600,000, and you get 30 males per family. How many of you came from a family that had 30 brothers in it? And that's not to count all the sisters that they would have had. Can you imagine having families of 60 See, that comes to be a problem. How many people are there out there anyway? Here's moms giving birth to 40 or 50 children, and that's an issue. Now, there are a lot of, one last issue is Israel's inability to fully occupy the land. In Exodus 23 and then in Deuteronomy chapter 7, God will tell them, look, I'm not going to drive all these Canaanites out before you all at once. I'm going to do it a little at a time so that you can move in there and take over the land and the land not go to waste. And you think, they got 2.5 million people they need to move into this place? And goodness gracious, there are, by the way, about 9 million people in the country of Israel today. But think about 2.5 million people. So there are some issues. People have raised some questions about the big numbers. There have been some solutions offered. Maybe there are symbolic numbers. The census is not meant to be a literal count, but there is some symbolism going on in there. It could be some translation issues. The word Eleph may not mean thousands in this particular case. It also can mean something like a platoon. So there are 50, let's see, what do we got? From the descendant of Reuben, there would be 465 platoons of people that are quite smaller, so that you get down to, like maybe 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 people in each one of these tribes. Could be deliberate hyperbole, just exaggerating numbers to make a point about Israel's blessing. Or it could be, what would be the last solution? Just take it the way it is. Literal numbers. Just leave it alone. I think if you probably ask a typical Jew of Moses' day, are those numbers literal? What do you think he would say? Sure, why not? I don't think it probably occurred to those people to say, wait a minute, those numbers are way out of line. There are too many impossibilities here. There are too many problems. I think that they would probably look at you funny and say, why are you worried about a thing like that? Numbers are just numbers. They're there. It's sort of like the resurrection of the dead. You go out and you talk to a lot of people about the resurrection of the dead, and how are they going to react to you? What are you, nuts? Nobody can be raised from the dead. When a person's dead, they're dead. They rot in the grave. Nothing happens. Resurrection is impossible. What about us? Boy, that is the center part of our faith. And we've got reasons why. I'm not saying we believe in resurrection irrationally. I'm saying we believe in resurrection and believe we have reasons to believe in resurrection, but most of the world just doesn't believe that. Same thing with these numbers. The idea is not to scientifically explain the detail, but to understand it as God has put it down here. Here are the people of God. We're going to count these folks, and we're not going to worry about whether that's too many or outrageously too huge or any of that. We're just going to take it as this is what God said, and this is the way we're going to understand it. And we have to understand it in terms of those huge numbers, instead of rewriting the Bible to make it say, well, let's rewrite the Bible and understand it in terms of smaller groups of people. So, he is telling Israel of their potential. He is telling Israel of the great blessing on Israel. Here are these huge numbers of people. They have grown like crazy under God's leadership. Under God, when they thought they were suffering the worst, 400 years of Egyptian slavery, what was actually happening? Growing, 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 until Pharaoh finally even said, we got to get these guys out of here. They're going to overrun us all. Leads them out into the promised land. Should they be able to take the promised land? With 600,000 soldiers, I would think they would just run right over the top of the promised land. What happens though, here's the irony of this thing. What happens in chapter 14? God said, go look at the land I'm going to give you. 12 spies go up there and they do their reconnoitering and they come back, and what's the first thing they say? Are you kidding? We can't take that land. It's too huge. And Moses said, did you count how many soldiers we've got? Like 600,000 soldiers? And they said, we can't go in there. They're too big. They're too powerful. Their cities are walled. We can't go in. There is the faithlessness of the Israelites. Even though, it doesn't even take a miracle. The Israelites don't even have to believe in a miracle to believe they can take the promised land. They've got 600,000 soldiers. But still they refuse to go in. God's people get that way sometimes. We get that way sometimes. We start seeing the obstacles and we build those obstacles up so huge that we can't even begin to trust God. The census, the big thing about this is the census points toward answers to questions like, who am I? Well, you're an Israelite. You belong in this group of people. You're a part of this nation. Do I belong? Well, yes, you do. You are an important part of this group. Is God faithful? Well, here's God blessing these people and growing this nation. Who are my sister and brother? Now, that's going to be a real important question. I mean, one of the scribes even asked Jesus, well, who is my neighbor anyway? And Jesus told him in no uncertain terms, everybody is your neighbor. Everybody in need around you is your neighbor. Who is my brother and sister? Well, here are these Israelites all gathered up. We've counted them. Do I have a future in this community? What are my roots? There are all kinds of questions that are answered in this census. And you have the importance of leadership in the Israelite community. Moses is told by God, pick out these 12 guys. Eliezer, Shelumiel, Nahshon, Nethanel, Eliab. I'm just saying those to show you know I don't know how to pronounce them. There's that long list of leaders, and I got to one I couldn't pronounce, and so I'm stopping there. There are those lists of leaders. Leadership is going to be a really important idea in the book of Numbers. Who are our leaders? And then the failure of those leaders is going to be a big issue in the book of Numbers. Remember how I told you at the beginning when we started studying this was the old generation and the new generation? One of the things the new generation is going to have to learn is how leaders fail so that they don't walk in the same footsteps that the old generation does. How do we follow our leaders? What kind of leaders do we need? That's an important thing. As we move into the future, leadership is going to be a really big issue in God's church as well as anywhere else. Look at verse 53 in Numbers chapter 1. The Levites, however, are to set up their tents around the tabernacle of the covenant law so that my wrath will not fall on the Israelite community. The Levites are to be responsible for the care, and that word care there is a special Hebrew word that means the Levites are responsible to be on guard duty for the tabernacle of the covenant law. So you already have this announcement by God that this camp that the Israelites live in is going to be a holy place, that there are holiness issues. And we'll talk about that. I'm sorry, I took way too long talking about chapter 1 to get into chapter 2 today, looks like. So I apologize about that. But there is a holiness there. God is going to be living in that camp. God is going to be right there in the middle of their camp. And they're going to have to be holy. They can't just go up and walk up anytime they want to the tabernacle. They have to be protected in some senses from the tabernacle. And then look at the next verse. The Israelites did all this just as the Lord commanded Moses. Wouldn't it be great if the rest of Numbers was, and the Israelites did just as the Lord commanded Moses? Instead, what you have is a people griping, complaining, rebelling, everything you can imagine from the Israelites. All right, we were going to put a stop to it right there, I guess. Next week, we're going to look at Numbers 2. We will look at Numbers 2. We will look at Numbers 3. And we will look at Numbers 4 next week, okay? And then when I get back, we're going to start cruising through some of the other more interesting things to us in the book of Numbers. Let's pray, please. Father, we thank you for the record of your interactions, both with the Israelites and with the early Christians and with us. Father, I pray that we can hear the lessons, hear the ideas, hear the theology that you are trying to get us to understand so that we might indeed truly be your people. Bless everybody here. As we worship today, may we honor you in everything we do. And I pray it in Jesus' name. Amen.